Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, after completing my videos on energies, I'll move into the energy machines out there. What are they? Another great misunderstanding that needs to be clarified. There's radionic machines, there's psionic machines, there's psychotronic machines, and kind of a subdivision, there's the orgone machines, which are basically not separate machines, but we will cover them as well. So we're going to cover these, and we have to define these things. One of the problems is that we've ran into the mediocre reality of life where everybody just names everything the same, and it's all the same, it's all this. Yeah, speak on, foolish dumbhead. The whole idea is you just get misinformation everywhere you go by people that really aren't educated, haven't talked to the professionals in the field, they haven't bothered to take courses and listen to my videos and other things. They've read a bunch of bogus books produced by a bunch of disinformation agents, just like all of history and the people involved with it. So we have to define this. As the expert in this field as that I've been for the last 40 years, the author of 35 books, 5 courses. I think there's more than 35 books, actually. I've been on BBC, CNN, The Art Bell Show, etc. Many years ago. And, of course, the leading researcher and engineer of this entire field. And there's no one that really comes close, and I understand all these machines at a level that no one else does. Simple as that. They're stuck in their childish garbage tools made by Satanists and criminals and some globbly gloop of plastic that is toxic. So let's get into radionics. Now, radionics is a term that I embraced a little while ago that we're moving away from, and we're moving away from even our name as we are now off-world tech instead of radionic tech, because it really doesn't, it's a pigeonholed area, but certainly it describes what basically radionics is a conscious, and they're all consciousness machines. They work off of consciousness. None of them work off of traditional energies. And radionics is a term that Ruth Drown, the chiropractor and secretary of Abrams, coined after Abrams died, and she moved to Los Angeles from San Francisco and set up her own chiropractic organization and started building these machines. She's also basically responsible for saving radionics. She took it over to England, where it was semi-illegal, or at least accepted, and taught it to Delaware, who got it going over there, and it is legal to use radionics over there in a very prescribed, careful manner. You are not a doctor, and you can't say you are, and you can't say you cure things, but there are radionic practitioners that are doing, quote, medical type things in England consistently. They're listed on the Radionic Association of England's site, and you can just contact them. And people should, if they have problems, try them, see what they can do for you. And definitely get back to me and give me feedback of the kind of results that you have been able to get. So with all that, we have to get into the clarifications of what they are. Now, radionics is the child of the electric reaction of Abrams. Albert Abrams came up with his own type of design. Now, what's interesting is that his original designs are nothing at all like what Ruth Drown did. I think they kind of evolved into this, but it's difficult to say. He had all sorts of different machines, and some were very electronic, broadcasting frequencies, particularly radio wave, RF frequencies, radio wave frequencies. So it's really hard to define what he did in his original equipment. He was a medical doctor of great note, coming from a wealthy family, and put together ERA. That's what he was selling. He was not selling radionics, electric reaction of Abrams. Of course, he named it after himself, like all these egotistical doctors and scientists do. So he came up with that concept, and he was selling huge amounts of this equipment and making quite a bit of money from it, and was planning on setting up his own hospital there, so the gossip goes. because he didn't really need the money, but I don't know. People seem to never have enough money. It seemed like a lot of what he did was a little bit too greedy, but I don't know, and we have to figure out. If you're trying to build a hospital, it's going to cost a lot of money. I believe the rental service, which is very typical in these industries, he was renting out his machines for a couple of $100, I believe, if we can believe it, which, all these things take huge amounts of research. You want really good research like this, you're going to have to support this organization. And make sure you subscribe, you like, and you should join us over at Patreon to get all the real updates, which is we have updates that go out every Monday. Which you'll be able to hear what's going on with the organization. And all this is for only $6 a month. And that way you can really vote and support the good people. If you don't, you're part of the problem. You're supporting the bad people by lack of support of the good. So we really don't know. We have a lot of his old journals and everything else. And I've got a massive amount of stuff that I have to go through and read. And who has the time to do that with so many other things happening? So he was renting, I think he was renting out these machines like $220, $230 a month. And you're talking about 1920, which is probably equivalent about $2,000, which is a lot of money. And that seems very greedy to me, but maybe it wasn't as much as I think. So he's planning on opening his own hospital. His journals are very medically based. They're for medical doctors. He was a medical doctor. This wasn't some amateur trying to do things. On the other hand, medicine in 1920, well, I'm not sure what that was all about either, how advanced it was, but needless to say, he was an accredited medical doctor with degrees from the United States and even Germany, I believe. Because he graduated so early, he had to go over to Germany and take more classes and wait till he turned the age so he could practice as a doctor. I guess he was the original Doogie Howser. Does anybody get that? Probably not. But the whole idea is that's a long time ago, Doogie boy. So the whole idea is that his electric reaction of Abrams was quite a difference than it turned into. Now, apparently, Ruth Drown was his secretary. So it goes, I'm not entirely sure, but she then took his information and principles and so forth and put together her own unique way of making radionic instruments that pretty much has stayed that way since the introduction of these. So all radionic instruments that we have today are pretty much based on that. But radionics is, as it's understood in the law, is a medical device, an illegal medical device, because you can't use these. It's untested, unproven, and considered quack. So using radionics in that particular way is basically not legal. But it is and it isn't. Doctors in certain states, like New York State and a few others, can treat people with anything they want. It's in their state law. So there are doctors, particularly in New York State, who are using radionics to treat people, and probably in other places. This is not talked about. It's not advertised because it brings ridicule from their fellow egg-headed freaks. So we do have to understand that as well. So that's determined. Of course, Ruth Drown was highly persecuted, and eventually her equipment and her organization was smashed. She was working with her daughter. She was arrested along with her secretary, and of course, Ruth Drown herself was arrested and was going to go to court. I don't know if this was her second offense or not, but they were going to go to court, and she died before going to court. I believe something in her 70s. I'm not sure. Wasn't really very old, but it wasn't necessarily all that young. So she was unable to go to court, which probably they would have found her guilty. And of course, they did find her daughter guilty, and she got I'm trying to remember the years now. It's just, I'm terrible with this stuff, and I've got so much going on, it's hard to remember it all. But she got 3 or 5 years, something ridiculous, for these practices, and got fairly long probation. I don't know if that was dropped or not, but this was Los Angeles County, and of course known for their criminality right up to this day, and their harassments. But she was in practice for 20 or 30 years, and I don't believe there were any complaints against her. What happens is the claim is that they sent her chicken blood, and she came back with a whole litany of problems. So I don't know if any of this is true, because I believe nothing. When it came back, and this has been done with many practitioners, where they come back and they send them a sample and they say, well, what is it? It generally is never human blood. So, and we just don't know. A lot of animals have cancer and other diseases. So, well, we really don't know. And I'm not sure that they know either. And I'm not sure they analyze animal blood the same way or even can pick it up. So we don't know if some of these animals actually didn't have these conditions. But it's kind of strange in a general understanding of it, and looks, of course, terrible. You go into court and you say, well, this guy says she's a doctor. I sent her goose liver blood, and she came back and said it was human. Boy, how much stupid can you get? This is a special kind of stupid. So it looks terrible. Supposedly, Drown was tested in many other areas, as was Abrams, or at least an associate of Abrams. Abrams never was tested. He refused to do it. An associate of his was tested per Scientific American magazine at that time, and he failed with everything. Couldn't detect anything with his machines, so they say. So, again, how much true is this or not? Because, they're such stumble bums, it's unbelievable. Apparently, Ruth Drown was tested as well at a scientific research college, and she did horrific, failing every test they ever gave her. And she was tested in a couple of ways, even the fact of, I can't believe that she thought that she could stop the bleeding of an artery with her technologies. And they actually cut the arteries of 2 dogs. And of course, she couldn't do that, and the dogs died. This is pretty horrific. Did she really do that? Was she told to fail? Did she have the audacity to think that she could stop bleeding that way? Now, bleeding is very interesting, and there is some old mythology that the hex masters in Pennsylvania were able to say some words over a bleeding person, and they could stop the bleeding. Again, has any of this been verified? I don't know. We don't know, and it's really sad in this day and age. So we don't know, and this would be a great thing, which I'm trying to use a GoFundMe project where you can go fund a documentary on Ruth Drown and these people in general. It'd be wonderful to put these together and to go interview people. But, it's getting so late now that all the people that kind of knew her are dead. But it would be fascinating to do a whole documentary on this, but that's for another time and place. So the point is, there's radionics. What is radionics? Radionics is a machine consciousness technology for medical use. We have to define that. Machines are generally, all radionic machines are dial machines with anywhere from, real machines have to have at least 9 dials plus. But we have machines that are 1 dial up to 60 or 70 dials now that you can get in some machines. But basically, it's a dial. It also has witness in plates and out plates, as I like to call them. This is what radionics is, but it's generally a dial. If we want to define them in their traditional amount, it's a dial unit. None of Ruth Drown's units, or at least her main units, were electric, running on electric power and using electromagnetism. She called it radionics because she thought it was some sort of wave, a radio wave of sorts that she was creating through those machines. Abrams called it the electric reaction of Abrams because he was using some electric as well. So it's kind of a big confusion of what was going on there, and figuring out the reality of that is different. But we certainly can define a actual radionic machine being a machine that has multiple dials on it. So in terms of a classic one. And what you use on that machine are what are called rates, or numeral symbols of a particular energy field. So you could say 1215.3 is the numeral symbol of whatever, headache. And that is then put in the machine, and this is supposed to treat or a headache. And you do that for any particular condition. And obviously, here's a miniature radionic machine. This was a personal model you carry around with you. You've got the dials here, and this is 1 through 9. You have an in plate and you have an out plate, otherwise known as a witness plate. And this is where the energy comes out, otherwise known as a rubbing plate generally. But Drown never made units of one dial. She made different types of units, but they never were one. You can't do anything with one dial. You really can't do anything with 3 dials either in what is considered traditional radionics, because you need to dial more. Now, you can use 3 dial units for metaphysical practices, which is what we're going to get into secondly here. Metaphysical practices of radionic type technology is called psionics. And, I've always liked that word. Radionics is something that is a term that's been used in many industries, particularly the radio industry. So radionics is not necessarily a new term. People love to add onyx onto things because it gives it that electrical type look to it. So radionics, which could become radio waves, radiation, all the things that come with that, is certainly not new. And that word was in use before Drown used it herself. She may not have heard about it, particularly in times when there wasn't lots of information. No internet, people. So how did she know about it? So we move into what is psionics. Now, psionics, and I love that term psionics, just as I love the term psychotronic. This really describes the technology much better because a non-electric machine is not putting off radio waves. There's no RF frequencies there. So it doesn't make much sense, but they're trying to equate that to some sort of consciousness or psychic frequency. Delaware, when he was, who Ruth Drown trained, when he was taken to court, stated that these are nothing more than psychic tuners. Well, that's right. So using a term like psionics, psi, mind, psychic, onyx, like radionics, or I should say electronics, makes a lot of sense to me because that's what it is. You're combining psychic energies with electronic circuits. Excuse me. Now, the whole idea is that is not that makes a lot of sense. Now, where did that word come from? Now, psionics, I'm not sure who coined that, but psionics really comes from science fiction again. We're falling into this virile kind of nonsense and I'm not sure who used this initially, but psionics was an amplification of psychic powers through everything from helmets to rods to lights through to some dial units. So this was talked about in fiction. And anybody who read science fictions, and there's a few novels and so forth, I forget what they were, I never read these, that talk about psionics. And it is a big part now of the role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, where there's a whole division of psionic tools and psionic they have game books talking about psionics and psychic power, etc. So it's kind of a whole division. The problem is when that happened, particularly with Dungeons and Dragons, is that it took whatever quality that term had and turned it into actual comedy. It's just science fiction nonsense. And it took the pseudoscience that radionics had away from it. But it's a perfect term for what this technology is. It's psionics. It's psychic combined with electronics to produce a particular result. Now, of course, the fiction went into all sorts of different wild areas and everything else, but certainly is an appropriate term. Now, psionics was always there for many years and started in the I don't know when psionics came out in these fiction books. Could have been the 20s. I don't know how far it goes back, but the bottom line is that this was out there and is still out there today, but it's considered not to be a serious area of study. And you're going to... this further was perpetrated by an author that I published for many years called Charles Casamato, who wrote books on psionics. He was a big fantasist. He was into all these books. He built funny little helmets. He brought all these tools. All of this stuff was gotten from his science fiction reading. And of course, these are the kind of things that you, as a science fiction participator, can kind of build yourself. These pseudo electronic devices and mimic the people as people do cosplay of today, costume play of today. But this really never caught on, and nobody really uses that term because it is linked to that. Sadly, because that's really what most of the tools out there that are not purely medical. Now, every time you use radionics, you're insinuating a medical tool because that's where it was coined by. This is what Ruth Drown used it for. This is what they use it in England for. The Radionic Association is teaching people how to do things medically and agriculturally based. So that's what it is. So that's what radionics means. It puts you in that little area. And you may or may not have interest in that. Initially, I had no interest in those areas and found the psionic area to be the most interesting. I was the first one to manufacture, produce, add other literature of making these psionic type devices that were for metaphysical uses. So there's one that's used for agricultural and healing, and then there's one that is used for metaphysical uses. Success, protection, sending energies of any type to handle a situation. You're pretty much saying that a psionic device is an electronic spell casting machine is what you could give it the terminology to understand what psionics is. And that's what it's used for. Now, generally, we don't see spells as healing people and helping agriculture, even though there certainly is that aspect of what is considered occult sciences. But in general, that is not what handled by radionics. Now, science, of course, got into all of that. And then people started to use magical symbols on them and everything else. And it really wasn't very well embraced. But this started in the 90s as I started to sell the equipment and to publish more editions on this particular subject matter. And the fact is, there's a great interest in psionics. A lot of people are not interested in healing. They're not interested in gardening or agriculture. But everybody's interested in making more money, influencing people, and bringing in positive energies for themselves, etc. And this also included where this kind of technology started to be used for justice and curses, and was used in psionic combat, which was a book I published as well. So this was something that everybody got interested in and kind of tweaked them to a large degree. And what was the basically the pioneering effort to take this from what was kind of a dry medical subject. And there were certainly people making machines in the United States then, and people still doing it. And there were many. Lord's Industries was a big one who Americans went to. Bruce Copeland was around. Hieronymus was still around, but these weren't, they didn't talk all that much about that, those type of things there. But I mean, there were people making these machines back then, but most of them were geared towards health or agriculture. So when the psionic stuff hit, there wasn't really anybody offering that except myself, and this went from there. And all the markets we have today was because that was started and because of myself publishing these books and offering these things. We were the first ones to sell helmets. We were the first one to sell 3-dial equipment, 5 dials, and all this not radionic, all this psionic equipment. Well, I was the first one to do it and offer that out there. So that's what psionics basically is. Now we move into psychotronics. Now, psychotronics is very interesting. This is a word, of course, that comes from the Soviet Union or Eastern Europe, particularly, I believe it was the Czechoslovakian Pavlita, I think it's Pavlita, was the person who coined that word and patented and made psychotronic devices. Now, psychotronics is very interesting. And again, all these terms get mixed, but they're really not appropriate to mix them. And we're going to talk about the ultimate now, which is coming out, which is really, we need to change all this terminology because it's so confusing into really what it is. So psychotronics was based on shape vibration. I believe that this person from Czechoslovakia did a whole bunch of research. There's still film on him doing things and how he's made devices based on shapes. And he even patented, I guess, a little pyramid that you would put your razor, your shaving razor in, and that this was supposed to sharpen the razor blade. And he got a patent on it. But it was much more than that. This is detailed in Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain book that was written in the early 70s. And I think they had a follow-up, late 60s, early 70s, whose names, again, escape me. But she went to the East, and they had all this research going on there, which was very popular. And he was one of them. As I said, there's pictures of his stuff. But psychotronics is very interesting because psychotronics tend to be based on shape and how shape produces energy. Now, the way we can easily explain that, but it's very complicated with psychotronics, but is that a pyramid has energy. Why does it have energy? Because of the shape. You know, everybody's making pyramids out of metal now, which I think is a mistake, actually. But pyramids were never, they didn't find any metal pyramids anywhere. It's the shape of the pyramid that counts, and that produces the energy. It can be made from just about everything. Does metal enhance it? Well, the ancient Egyptians didn't use metal. There's talk that there was a gold capstone, but it doesn't seem to be a thing that was done anywhere else. So the shape of things, and you would take different shapes. You'd put a square kind of together with a ball and then a triangle over here. And basically what you were doing was creating within that unit different shapes. Because a ball against a pyramid or a block, and you put this together. Well, what is the space in between there? Well, you're creating another space, a unique energetic space. And these devices actually put off lots of energy. And here we go again. Most of that information has never been translated into English. We do have photos and everything, but we ignore it. What's new? Because regular science doesn't understand it, and they will not give up their power to amateurs or people that know more than they do. So if you go to someone and they don't know as much as you do, particularly a so-called professional, they will shun you and reject you instantly. They don't want to feel disempowered and have you empowered. You talk about it. I found this to be very true, particularly with media people. Media people don't want to talk about anything that they don't know. They're not inquisitive. They want to be in control of the situation. They want to understand it. So you run into that problem. So that's what psychotronics was. And these were the kinds of devices that were talked about and supposedly used by the Soviet Union in many different instances in psychic warfare, psychotronic warfare, which there actually is a treaty stating that you're not supposed to use that. Which is quite interesting. And there were many of these devices. These have been shown in a few TV specials on, I think they combined UFOs and psychotronic devices. One of them was narrated by Roger Moore, and you can find these probably on YouTube somewhere. I used to have them up, but I no longer do. Now, it's all very fascinating when you look at it, but these are very unique. Psychotronics is very unique. They're very odd instruments. They work in strange ways. They're working off of non-electric informational energetic fields, as I've been telling people, not any kind of electromagnetism. None of that is how these work, but they actually are motors that work on the energy that you're drawing in, the non-electromagnetic energies that you're drawing in from the atmosphere. Quite fascinating. Now, psionics, generally like radionics, have dials. And again, these can be as minimal as one up to quite a few. So psionics falls into that radionic category again, except for metaphysical uses. Now, psychotronics tend not to be, and of course, people blend this all together. Psychotronics tend not to have dials on them. They tend to be kind of motors, and they tend to put out energies without dialing them. Quite fascinating, and something that everybody should look at and enjoy the fascination of this. Now, when we move away from psychotronics, we move into actual orgone devices. Now, orgone devices are just radionic, psionic type devices that you are putting in a particular energy that you're building into the circuit, otherwise known as orgone accumulation. And to get your head around orgone, you can listen to my previous videos that discuss orgone and the other energies. So there's nothing different about an orgone unit except for the fact that it is drawing on what's considered orgone, which is accumulated from the atmosphere. But generally, all these units, and some are slightly different, but the bottom line is they're just radionic units that have in and out plates and a series of dials. Again, they can be as simple as 1 up to 30, 40, 50. Who knows how many have been put on these things. So, and they draw this energy in, they accumulate it, and it's supposed to empower what you're doing as an amplifier. So they're using orgone as an amplifier of the particular purpose. And most of these, yet again, are more in the psionic realm. They're more used for metaphysical purposes, but people have used orgone for medical purposes as well. And there's a lot of claims by some manufacturers of these things of how strong and wonderful it's going to make it. That is part of the process of the advertising of these particular tools. So these are all machine-based. Now, Psychotronics, again, is not electrical powered. Neither is Psionics. Generally, none of these are electrical powers, and neither is most of the radionics. What we have here in general is the fact that none of these are working on electricity and the electromagnetic. I recently obtained a radionic machine, a 12-dial unit from the Radionic Association out of England, who we have to assume knows something. Their unit is non-electric. So here we go again. So they're not using any kind of electric amplification whatsoever. Ruth Drown didn't do that either. None of her stuff was electric. The fact that we move into psychotronics, none of that is electric. Now, orgone units tended to mix electricity in as well, and that may be one of the reasons why it is such a toxic energy as well. But the audience out there, the buyers, don't believe in non-electric stuff. So most of the time, when these units have electricity in them, what they're doing is just turning on a light, which was the case with the Bruce Copen units, and maybe work some of their more complicated number generator systems they have in there. So it can vary. You can find a, quote, radionic unit. As I said, Copen's stuff tended to have electricity. He did this to have greater believability in his technology and to sell it for a huge price. And of course, when we get into all the more electronic ones that have actual number displays and so forth, you have to use electricity to generate that. Now, using dials, which have numbers on them, doesn't require you to have electricity. So you don't really need that. So that's why it wasn't used in most of those and still isn't used today. Now, all of this proves, again, that this is not some sort of electromagnetic process. Then what is it? Well, it's a higher consciousness process where you're tapping into energies that you're drawing in to empower things. And you're using what is the informational energetic fields, the energy that creates the universe, you're able to tap into with these machines, which the humans are so advanced in these type of things for unknown reasons. You're using this very high level of energy that is not the low level of energy called the electromagnetic, which these higher energy fields create. So the informational energetic fields, the occultons, create the electromagnetic spectrum. But none of these tools do it, and that's one reason why they've always been so criticized. Well, there's nothing here. The electrical circuits make no sense, and, well, this is all true. What has happened with some people who did amplify the energy going through these machines and out of it, people like Hieronymus and a few others, and myself, are using extra components that are electrical to amplify the non-electrical fields by changing the energy as it goes in. And I have a very special process to change these informational energetic fields, these occultons. I change the electronics at a subatomic level so they can grab these very subatomic energy fields. Now, the new type of energy that's out there, so we can really clarify all this stuff, is it's force energy machines. So this is force energy is a better way, because this is a very strong force of creation. So it's a much better way to describe it, and this can be used for anything that you desire it to be used for. You generally target something with a particular photograph of whatever that may be to send the energy there. And again, this energy can be anything from prosperity to healing. So it covers the wide variety of it. Well, you wouldn't get Ruth drowned, as far as I understand, doing things to bring prosperity to you. She was healing people of physical problems. So we need to move past that. Radionics really doesn't cover it anymore. It's technically, other than England, it is an illegal term. Medical radionics is illegal in the United States. The term psionics, of course, is something that has comic book nature to it. Nobody seriously calls anything they make psionic machines. It's based in fantasy. Then we move into, of course, Psychotronics. Now, Psychotronics is the least known of the field because there's virtually nothing on this. We have no idea what the Russian psychotronic devices were made, where they are. We do have pictures of several of them, some of them even working. We do have the inventor himself, who actually has taken video of it as well. And the film is kind of interesting, but not very profound, because you don't really have much guidance of what's happening. And this was used for other things. Of course, Psychotronics was famous for its possible warfare use. The inventor figured out that he could kill certain insects with them in the area. So it's very interesting, Psychotronics, but we know absolutely nothing about it. There's really no books on it to any extent. And it's all been mixed together. They're mixing Psychotronics together with Radionics and Psionics, and it's just not two. It's completely different. With these shape vibrational put together to create a third or fourth or fifth energy, however you want to look at it. And then, of course, Orgone machines are just machines that are basic psionic machines or radionic machines that have an amplification in them of orgone energy. And there is some that have additional amplifications in them, some sort of circuits that apparently are solid state amplifiers within them as well. These are in these particular units as well. Some are powered, some are not powered. So, I mean, that's the clarification. What we need to do is get into the force energy machines, which I will be renaming all my stuff here, moving away from all those old things into the new force energies, which are have been defined and empowered to a point to make a lot of this very weak technology based strictly on your psychic consciousness into machines that are amplified and empowered from non-psychic realities alone. Now, you as the operator have to do everything, and your actual biophysical projections, otherwise known as psychic powers, are extremely important. But you are very weak if you're not amplifying, if you're not transmitting, if you're not properly grabbing that energy by using modified electronics. You get very poor results. So we do have to keep that in mind. So hopefully that's cleared everything up, and that we all know now what this is. We can understand it at a higher level, and we can go from there. This is all basic training that none of the people in this field seem to have it, or anybody that gets into it. They're being taught wrong information by a bunch of greedy, negative, and virtually evil people, who most of these people on top of it are involved with criminals. That's how sad it is. That's the kind of world we live in. But if you want to become a fool, You listen to fools, follow fools, repeat what they tell you. Don't support the good people. That makes you assured that the bad people will bring their junk to you. And it's so bad in this industry that this junk technology has actually killed people by filling them with toxic energies because they're manufactured to do just that. So, buyer beware, people. Support people. And not only will you lose your money, you may lose your life. Until next time.